Welcome back. You're watching The Fix with me, Karima Brown. I'm in conversation with the General Secretaries of both Cosatu and Saftu. Before the break, Becky, Zwelinzima Vavi made the point that state control of critical sectors of the economy, for example, energy, has gotten a bad name, not because the state is inherently incapable, but because of crony capitalism and because of the way in which the governing party has managed that system. Do you agree with him? And if you do, what then is the alternative? Should we have public-private partnerships, or should we remove the people that have used this proximity to power to steal from the state?
I think we need just to emphasize that there are public goods that should be at the hands of the state at all costs, in our view. That's why we are raising the issues of the energy as one of them. The second one can be the health. It has to be in the hands of the state. But in our case, the state has lost capacity. They've paid good people. They've never invested in the skills for people to be able to deliver the services to our people. So in that context, people were paid for the purpose of doing corrupt activities. We need to clean the state. We need to be able to capacitate. We need to be getting some people seconded from institutions, even from private sector at their own cost, to be able to help our state to be in a better position to be able to deliver those issues.
But Becky, let me put this challenge to you. I mean, in principle, in my own view, I agree with you. But the truth of the matter is our political system is so corrupted that model is simply leading to state capture. We've seen, for example, in the last week, the relationship between business people and people in the state, people setting up companies that are just there to facilitate money laundering, to facilitate the governing party accessing state resources to be able to fund either its own election campaigns and some business people. Basic things like, for example, RDP houses, was built with asbestos roofs. We shouldn't even have had that. But when we tried to correct that entire process was criminalized through a business person fronting as a business, accessing something like R1 billion annually as turnover, with massive donations to the governing party, 6 million there, 2 million here, 45,000 there, involving senior members of cabinet, senior members of the ANC's top 6. How do you justify continued state ownership if that is your record for 26 years in power, Becky?
I think you need to look both ways. There is no sector in the private sector that has not been involved in corruption. You can just name which one that you think is not involved in the corruption. Look to the bank, and the investigation and the corruption that has been happening in the banks. Look to some of the companies that during the COVID, they were doing corrupt activities. If you just go to the report in the Competition Commission, you will find from petrol companies, from pharmaceutical companies, almost in every sector in the private sector has been involved in corruption. And if you take that, you can just throw your hands in the air and say corruption is everywhere and corruption anywhere is bad everywhere. But it needs to be eradicated, and that's what we need to do it. That's why we're looking for these broad alliances to stand together and be able to fight corruption. The police, the corruption in the police, the corruption in the judiciary. But does that mean we must not do anything? No. We must unite. We must be able to root out corruption.
Okay, let's bring the question back as well, Nzima. I mean, we've looked at the capitalist system in itself, which, of course, engenders a culture of corruption. For every corrupt politician, there's a business person offering that bribe, right? But if we are to deal with corruption, how do we deal with powerful politicians and business people? Today's newspapers, for example, the ANC Secretary General, Ace Magashule, issues a warning, according to the City Press, to the National Prosecuting Authority and to the Hawks, and essentially dictates how he wants to be arrested if he is going to be questioned. And if you look at the Commission of Inquiry into state capture, Mr. Magashule, for example, is a person that seriously needs to explain his role in many, many tender scandals that bedeviled a place like, the Free State. How do we answer as organized labor, how do they answer powerful politicians like Mr. Magashule that tries to ensnare the law enforcement agencies in a corrupt and in a political agenda?
In our view, in Saftu, the ANC have played its role, and it has reached the end of its role, and it must be celebrated for playing such a leading role in liberating our people. But now, under its leadership, our country is going down the tubes, is going down the drain. Look at the levels of poverty, unemployment, inequality, corruption, and wonder as to how could you have then a Secretary General who threatens the NPA. How is that possible? It is possible because the entire party is about that. It's about slate, no longer about the moral values that Andrew Mlangeni stood and died for. Your problem, in our view now, is the ANC government. Secondly, the problem is the capitalist system that breeds that corruption itself. The economic system that is based on the survival of the fittest and the dog eat dog is bound to corrupt not just the private sector role players, but to corrupt the politicians, unless you can begin to shake that and transform. And that's why we're calling for the total overhauling of the system, such that the system is no longer just purely based on the logic of profit, but it is based on meeting the basic needs of our people. That's the second issue. Thirdly, it is deeply worrying that under the so-called Tumamina and the New Dawn, you still have a Secretary General that threatens the law authorities, that threatens the NPA, and that says, hands off us because we are above the law, apparently. Don't touch us because we will do to your country what we have been doing for the past 15 years or so. Deeply regrettable, and we should condemn that in no uncertain term. The NPA must be allowed to do its responsibility. South Africans must wake up and rally behind the Hawks. We must clap hands every time they arrest these crooks. Every day. That's what our people are expecting.
Okay, Mr. Beki, let me bring you in here. The Cosatu president, Zingiswa Losi, when you took to the streets, made it very clear that Cosatu workers will not rally behind those that have to answer in a court of law on allegations of corruption. Cosatu's response to Mr. Magashule's warning to the Hawks and to the NPA and to those ANC members who marched to Luthuli House to say, hands off Ace?
Our view is that as we were marching, we're going to the NPA, we're going to all the law enforcement agents, appreciating the arrest in the last few days. And we also warn that just arrest alone is not enough. We're looking to successful prosecution. We're looking to people being convicted, and the punishment must fit the crime. But we're also looking for the state recovering all the money stolen. That's why we appreciated the Asset for Faith unit for the work that they are doing in dealing with those issues. To us, the judiciary and the other law enforcement agents, including the NPA, is the organs that we should be sitting behind them, supporting them whenever they do, that they must act without fear or favor, irrespective of the person in whatever position one have in a political party or even in government. And to that extent, we appreciated the work that they're doing.
Okay, just as a final question, because it looks as if we might lose our line to you, Becky. There has been talk that a basic income grant would be an intermediary effort to give relief to the most vulnerable. The ANC, according to the last NEC meeting, was still costing that. Just as a practical, low-hanging fruit measure, is that something that Cosatu wants to see done as an intermediary measure, an economic policy measure that needs to be put on the table and implemented as a way to mitigate the devastating effects of COVID-19 and the devastation in the economy as a whole? Okay, we seem to have lost Becky and Charlie there. We'll try and get Cosatu's comment on that. But Zwelinzima, let's come back to the economic initiatives that needs to be put in place. Appreciating the fact that a total overhaul is probably something that you'll have to wage a lot more struggles than one strike for. So does Saftu, for example, support a grant?
Absolutely. In fact, we're calling for the continuation of the 350, but not as a token 350. We're calling for the 1,500 basic income grant to be introduced come the 1st of November. This 350 must be replaced by a basic income grant that will provide dignity, that will liberate the 6 million and above people who are currently receiving that 350. Nobody deserves to live on a 350 rands a full month. Worst of all, when it is going to be looted and suspended in some months, and you skip 2 months, you don't get it. So that will definitely be one of the measures. Tomorrow, together with the People's Coalition on COVID, we're convening a press conference to make a call that the basic income grant must be introduced at this moment when there are 12, 14 million people who are unemployed, when the levels of poverty are now climbing towards 70% of the population.
Vavi, I just want to ask you, you've been in conversations with Cosatu, and this has been very underreported. I mean, historically, Saftu grew out of your suspension and axing from Cosatu. NUMSA left, the federation was split. We saw united action in the streets, given the desperate situation. In your discussions with Cosatu, from what you can remember, will Cosatu be joining your call around the basic income grant? And most importantly, how important is worker unity and the coming together of federations around issues that faces your members? And how are you planning to take that united action forward?
Absolutely. This week was absolutely important for that. It was absolutely historic that workers from all federations join hands on the basis of common demands for jobs, for an economy based on their needs, and on corruption, on gender-based violence, and all of the issues, environmental
So there's in principle agreement from all the
We
unions.
need to continue. Our call from Saftu is we need to build the broadest unity possible amongst the working class formations, with the full understanding that trade unions on their own are not powerful enough, have been weakened, and they will not be listened to by government, even if they have a ritual one strike every year and so forth. What we need in this country is, through that unity of the working class formation, to embark on a sustained program of mass pressure on the authorities, on capital in particular, but broadly on government.
Just take viewers into confidence, people who don't know what was discussed between yourselves and Cosatu and the other formations. What are the things that you guys agreed on? So, for example, the basic income grant, what else are the points of commonality that you're going to take as trade union formations to the government, to business, and to community organizations?
We're pushing for the total overhauling of the economy. We're pushing for the economic demands of a document that has been adopted by many political parties, the Freedom Charter, to say that the ownership of the economy must shift towards the progressive forces of our people, the workers and the communities. We're pushing for the nationalization agenda. We're pushing that thing back on the agenda. And we demand that our people not be just relating to the economy as laborers, as migrant laborers in the mines. We're calling for the nationalization of the mining industry, and we are so devastated by the news that Anglo-American, Anglo-Gold are all packing their bags after looting our gold and other mineral resources for many hundreds of years. And now they're leaving our earth dry, and secondly, they're leaving behind a trail of destruction, mine dumps not opened, not ensured that they do not negatively infect the surrounding communities. We want an economy that is going to be based on addressing the ecological calamity that is unfolding. The fact that there's a crisis in many parts of the Eastern Cape and that we are waiting for the storms that are going to destroy so many livelihoods of so many people in KZN and eastern parts of Mozambique. So
okay, Zwelinzima, we're running out of time. Final question. Trade union unity. Is that on the table? Do we see the possibility of a new united trade union movement emerging out of these common struggles?
Campaigning together on the ground on all of these issues will make every worker to answer a question. Why do we have 4 federations instead of 1?
Well, that is your challenge. Zwelinzima Vavi, thank you so very much for joining us. We also say thank you so much to the General Secretary of Cosatu, Becky Nchalinchali, who of course was taken from us by the Zoom. Unfortunately, we could only get him for 30 minutes on that facility. We need to get our technology working, better in the future. But that is, of course, a major development that we will watch, whether the trade union formations will unite as the conditions of workers weaken and worsen in the coming months. And of course, all eyes on the President on Thursday when that special debate on economic recovery is going to come up. Still ahead here on The Fix, the rotten apples in the NPA. How much do they retard progress against corruption in the country? Stay with us.